we'll start by a duo. That's very interesting because BioVision asked, sometimes the scientists themselves are very close to the disease that they study or impacted by them. The two ladies I will bring up now have lived that. They've become, in some way, advocates for the diseases that they work on. So I would like to invite Dr. Bettina Rill and Dominique Debiet, please. We will give you microphones right here. Voila. Bettina Rill on your right, dressed in black and blue, is MD, PhD in molecular biology. She is the chair of ESMO, Cancer Patient Working Group, since 2015, and works for ICAM, a patient-led platform for the melanoma patient community in Europe. So we're talking about participation here. Dominique Debiet, dressed in gray on your left, is a pharmacist by trade, PhD. She specializes in toxicology and clinical pharmacology. She is vice president of the Europa Donna Forum France. She's an advocate for the optimal well-being of breast cancer victims, Chevalier de la Légion d'honneur. Is that correct? Yeah, okay, great, congratulations. We had just a few minutes to try and organize something here of a debate. I will let you start first, since breast cancer has been very much studied. We know we have genes for prediction for that disease. So I will, we have 10 minutes. I will lead you first, please. Okay,
thank you, Michel, and thank you to everybody. I'm very honored to be invited in BioVision. In a previous life, I was there, I think, 10 years ago, and it's always impressive. Yes, my organization is a non-profit organization, Europa Donna, has now more than 20 years. We were set up by a wonderful surgery who decides that breast cancer must be treated in another way, and he decided to found at the European level organization in each country. So now we are the big Europe because we are in 47 countries, and we raise the voice of the patient concerning breast cancer at all levels, so at the level of prevention, at level of treatment, and also the most important level, it's after the cancer, so the care of the patient and the psychological, social care of the patient. I think that I have a lot of things to say, but when I heard Agnès Buzyn, I say that I'm quite proud to be in France. We have the big chance to have a cancer plan, but I want to remind all the audience that it is not the case in all the countries. And at Europa Donna, we are fighting to have a certain level of treatment of patients that unfortunately it's not the case. Concerning all this new approach, I think that for the breast cancer, which it's a major cancer in France, and I think in all the countries, what is the most important is that, okay, let's say, predictive cancer and prevention and the personalized approach is something that we know for now for a long time, but it's getting more and more complicated. So what an important point, it's for example for clinical trials. I was involved 20 years ago in clinical trials, and it was quite simple. You had a breast cancer or you had no breast cancer, you know. Now you need to have, I think, a scientific degree to understand what is the level of your cancer, what is your gene approach, what will you have, and which can be something who is also difficult for the doctor and for the patient, that to have the good knowledge to understand and to say, okay, I will have, for example, 80% chance or male chance to have a cancer because I have a specific gene. What's that meaning? When you have the cancer, it's 100%, very basic. And you know, it's for the patients, I think that the question who is only the same is that, okay, all these things are wonderful. I'm sure that I will get better treated. But at the end, are you going to cure me? You know, very, very basic question. And as our patient association level, it's something that we meet more and more. It's that patient who knows that the treatment will be good, but they don't understand always what they are going to have and to get. And also, you know, that we are speaking a lot in France about participative decision concerning all the facts that now you can be treated by a certain approach or by another approach. But patients are different. Patients want to know, want to participate, which is wonderful. But you have also patients who don't want to know. And we have to be also very nice with them, because it's not an obligation, you know, to know, and to know that they will go through a difficult setting. What I have also in mind when I speak with patients is that the importance of being well treated, I think they are quite all informed by that. But what is the most difficult is after. It's when you say the sociological, the psychosociological approach, and it's really a different level of sometimes the level of science given by all this precise and personalized medicine. You have not to forget that what is important, it's the follow-up. It's that also, you know, patient can have another cancer and they must be also taking care. So it's a different approach for that. At the Europa-Donna level, we are fighting a lot to have this patient care as the best quality of this patient care. So that's my talk.
Now, for breast cancer, I think in the last 10, 15 years, as you've said, we know a lot, and it's getting more and more complex to get the patients aware. But in the case of melanoma, which is on the rise right now, which is a very aggressive and nasty cancer, what is your perspective now as you are a new startup compared to it doesn't work, you think? Well, just exchange. Okay, perfect. Do you have a different approach? How do you see the future of personalized medicine with your cancer?
So, as you just mentioned, we are at the very other end of what we had just heard about breast cancer, because until very recently, something like 5-6 years ago, there was nothing that really worked in melanoma. And then all of a sudden, we are actually an example for personalized medicine that makes all the difference, with the appreciation of the role of the BRAF mutation. And that was something that was just unheard of, and many of you might have seen these pictures of a tumor-riddled patient who, on targeted therapy, gets rid of his tumors in a very short amount of time. And this is often a picture that is shown as an example of the power of personalized medicine. What I would like to add, and we had a fantastic introduction, what France is doing on terms of personalized medicine, in my opinion, this is just the beginning. It sounds great and big and ambitious, but this is just the beginning, because cancer is not such an easy target. BRAF mutations in melanoma have been a game changer, and it is an example that you have the mutation, you respond to therapy, and it works. It is as close to a miracle as anything I've ever seen, because it was my husband who had melanoma, and that is what brought me into advocacy. A single of these pills, and you see the tumors shrink. And this, just to see that with your own eyes, makes you believe. Seeing is believing. Having said that, at the same time, it's not just easy that you take some tumors, you do some smart sequencing, you get a result, and then you start treating. Because if you have a colon cancer and you have a BRAF mutation, the very same mutation, the drugs that work so fantastically well in melanoma will not work for you. So it is not just simple a result, a plus or a minus, that will tell you whether you get something out of that mutation. So I would caution against selling, well, we just sequence and then we have the results, because these mutations are not all the cause of the problem. You have something like bystander passenger mutations that are just accumulated. And this is before even looking at the real tumor. Melanoma is the worst of all in terms of heterogeneity. So this tumor is highly diverse, and even within the same patient. So if you take the tumor here and sequence it, you will not get the same result than if you took the tumor there and sequence it. But it is the same patient you have to treat. And you cannot just add drugs on top of each other. 10 drugs at the same time might target all your mutations, but they will kill the patient. So it is not as simple. And most what we're doing at the moment is exome sequencing. So we're just looking at mistakes in coding regions. That's just part of the problem. Most of our genome is not coding region. You can have lots of other ways how to get a cell to do things that you don't want to do. So I think we should think ahead, one step further. We have to think larger what cancer is about and then adapt our methods that we are prepared for the future. Because otherwise we end up with data we cannot act upon. And this is, in the end, we should never, ever forget. Medicines and any healthcare intervention are there to benefit patients. They're not there to fill databases. They're not there to produce publications. They're not there to keep people in a job. They're there to keep people alive. And we should always, in my opinion, whatever we do, this should be our focus, and we should never lose sight of that. To the next topic, I would say, and this has already been touched upon, that we think of personalized medicine as highly individual. It's me, I sequence my tumor, or however we want to do it, and then I get treatment. I think this is just one side of the coin, because this is only possible if we actually all together share our knowledge. It is only possible to say whether I'm a patient at risk or my tumor is a slow-growing one or a fast-growing one, if I can compare my data with the data of all of you. And I think this is what people are not aware. So if we say personalized medicine, we also should take a stance on, let's say, data regulation, data protection. I think we have to be aware that we cannot have one without the other. So the current ongoing discussion, for example, with respect to consent in clinical trials, we have to be aware what it does to personalized medicine, and we should take a clear stance. And to come to the, well, I'm a patient advocate, the point very close to my heart is patient participation as one of the 4 Ps that we had mentioned. And as I earlier said, the focus of whole healthcare is the patient. So I think participation should be the first P and not the last. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So two passionate cries here for maybe a P number 5 and a P number 6. P number 5 and 6 might be 1 and 2, I guess, patient and maybe the psychological aspect of treating cancer patients. Now, I have a question for Dr. Baudet. Let's talk about scientific research in order to go as fast as the needs are for personalized medicine. Do you think that the scientific community is very well linked with the needs of the people treating?
I think
does it work? Or you can try another one. This
will be working.
Perfect.
I think many of the important points that as funders we're facing have been raised, and I think you've raised a number of them. The importance of open access, open data, and participation is absolutely key, and there's already a good evidence for the importance of that. But as you mentioned also, the importance of doing trials in another way. Given the cost of trials, the pressure right now on funders for the number of trials that need to be supported using the current paradigm, it is no longer workable. So either we find ways of achieving trials on smaller number of people or using paradigms that are less expensive, that will certainly, I think, halt our capacity to deliver. And the last point, and no one really talked about it, but from a universal healthcare perspective is how long will our healthcare systems be able to afford this? And that's a very serious question. So now, from a research perspective, what we're funding is health economy, and how do you build the economy in all of this?
Perfect, thank you very much. It gives us another perspective. I think we'll have a chance to talk about it. Thank you very much, ladies. You can now maybe sit down, and I'll take this. Thank you. Okay. Let's stay in the field of cancer. Now I would like Mrs. Hélène Espérou to join us. Hélène Espérou is Director of the Medical Scientific and Quality Project of Unicancer Group. Unicancer Group comprises 20 French cancer centers. It is private and non-profitable. She's an MD, trained in hematology. She worked for a long time at l'Hôpital Saint-Louis. She headed important mandates for the French government, Ministry of Health and Health Policies. And Mrs. Espérou, I think now you're going to talk to us about the Observatory of Patient Expectations. Holistic, the word holistic I like. Holistic medical care from diagnosis to remission. It's all yours. You have 7 minutes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michel. I would like to thank the organizers for the opportunity to present the action of the French cancer toward patients during their treatment and beyond that in the field of the sanitary democracy. First of all, I would like to insist that the concept of personalized medicine is not only a biological issue, which can be summarized as a good drug for the good patient with a well-characterized tumor. The other very important side of personalized medicine consists in accompanying patients with their own individuality during all the period of treatment from the diagnosis until the remission phase. And so this aspect of personalized medicine represents one of the two main expectations of patients that we could assess with our patient expectation observatory. Next slide, please.
Oh, yes. Sorry.
So, yes. Unicancer, that which regroups 20 French cancer centers, was created in 2011, Observatory of Patient Expectation, to answer to some major issues. It was an innovative initiative from our group to take into account the expectation of patient in a prospective way. And the aim was the adaptation of the care provision to these expectations of patient. And of course, it's some of apport to sanitary democracy to take into account the patient and his involvement in the evolution of his own medical care. With the first in this observatory, what we do, we have set in place an online consultation, which in 2012, and about 200 patients and large public has the possibility to exchange on their perception of the care of excuse me, it's difficult for me to speak English, as you know, but excuse me.
You're doing a great job. Just let yourself
I'm
go
very,
there.
very sorry. So what I would like to say is that is the first expectation of patient is to be cured, and we have not, we have to keep this in our minds, this first expectation of patient, which is to be cured with the most effective treatment with less side effect. But we have to bear in mind that the patient wants also to be considered not only as a cancer patient, but also as a person with a psychological, social, professional, emotional individuality. And we know that this response to these expectations depends on many issues, the attitude of health professionals, but also organization of health by health facilities. And our ambition in Uni Cancer Center is to provide the best organization in which the professionals can answer at best to the patient expectation. For instance, in one center in Lille, in the Oscar Lambret Center, an important work was conducted to ease the feeling of abandonment experienced by patients after their hospital discharge. By anticipating the social, personal, physical needs of patients, the return at home is planned in better condition. Then this process reduces patient anxiety and also the risk of hospitalization. This process is now developing in other centers to improve their own organization. Indeed, we have learned from patients that the condition for a real improvement to be an equal access, whether it be financial or geographical. So, with our 2 online participatory consultations, we could use the patient experience to improve our organization of health facilities. Furthermore, the patients appear satisfied to contribute to the professionals' thinking, even without waiting for immediate personal benefit. It is a concrete action of sanitary democracy with a real sharing of expertise to improve health organization. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I have a first question in line with what we've been talking about. Can you tell us at Unicancer if you patients participate very intensely in trials for new genes that are in the pipeline? We're talking about personalized medicine.
It's a problem.
It's a problem?
Yes,
okay, let's talk about the problem.
Because we have to, I think, to accompany patients to know better what is exactly personalized medicine and what is the implication of that to know that one patient has such abnormality, and we have to explain that the gene abnormality. It's not the same if it's a biomarker on the tumor or genetic, constitutional genetic default, and so it's not easy to understand for everyone. And so we, I think that we, as health professionals, we have the responsibility to explain very well, and so we have set up some formation for patients. We have a school of cancerology, and we have some session to give this formation to patients.
Okay, because this is interesting because that came up yesterday also, this question about us here specialists talking about a new wave of medicine and the general population is totally unaware. Even me as a health journalist, I talk about it, but I seem to get a blank wall in front of some people who say, what are you talking about? And when you're sick and you have cancer, I think that there is a problem. And how can we solve that? Do we have to put some money aside in order to get the public aware of this?
I think that we're talking about a cultural shift here. Yeah. And it's not only the public, it's also the clinicians and the researchers. Mm-hmm. We're moving from a research for researchers type model to research for patients and with patients. And it's not in the culture, it's not the culture of the doctor, and it's not the culture of the researcher to actually spend the time needed that you're mentioning. With the patient and listening to the patient actually, and taking the patient's point of view, put it at the heart of the research perspective, and that's very much starting to happen with what's called patient-oriented research, but it's really only the beginning. We've got to change the culture.
Dr. Bizet?
Just to add that yes. we are funding a lot of research in INCA on social science, psychology, sociology, on personalized medicine and all the inputs that we'll need to make the the population to understand the issues and to participate, because it's the only way to progress. As you said, everyone will have to participate for the treatment of each patient. And that's a real new paradigm.
Yes, because you can have the technology, but if people don't participate, this P, this one of the 4 Ps, won't work. And I think that is a very important one. I'm doing a story right now on this 4th P research group on transplant and the impact of sport on transplantation. And they can change the results because they participate very actively and they give details, very fine details of how they're evolving. But then for the general population in cancer, for example, if you've got a tumor and you're not aware of what's going on, you probably will not participate with such a degree of details, and the researcher is going to lose, and at the end the pharmaceutical is going to lose, and the product might not be as good. Am I right?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much, Madame Espérou. Thank you. Now let's move on again with cancer, since it's still the #1 killer on the planet. I would like to invite Mr. Massimo Tomasino. He is the section and group head at Infections in Cancer Biology Group of the International Agency for Research on Cancer, the World Health Organization. Thank you very much. We've always seen cancer as one of the 4 non-communicable diseases, and you're a specialist of oncogenic viruses, which has been an ongoing research topic. Can you give us a perspective on how we can use that in order to do personalized medicine? You got 7 minutes.
I think this is a beautiful example how we could apply all the P's. So I will try to. So 7 minutes to summarize the infections and cancer topic is it's an impossible mission, but I decide to give you a message. So when I talk to the public about the possibility that infections can lead to cancer, basically I can see the panic in the eyes of the persons. But actually, associating an infection to cancer, with cancer, it's a beautiful news, because we know where to hit. We know how we can prevent the development of cancer. And we have 2 beautiful examples of prophylactic vaccines that work very nicely. And one which is largely used in the population in the world is a human papillomavirus vaccine. It's a safe, very efficient in preventing premalignant lesions in the genital tract of the women. And we have so far sold 100, I mean, I say we, but the company is not me. I'm not associated with industry. I work for WHO. 150 million of doses in the world, so it's a very safe vaccine. And we have now facing a beautiful example of therapy against viruses, which is hepatitis C. We have drugs efficiently blocking the replication of this virus. So where we are at the moment, So this is the situation we are at the moment. So we have about 15–16% of human cancer worldwide associated with infections. But when we subdivide the world in low-resource countries and industrialized countries, the situation changed quite dramatically. You can see that basically in low-resource countries we have almost 30% of cancer associated with infections. So I just say in this pie, I just gave the percentage of the different infection agents. We have mainly viruses, so we have Epstein-Barr virus, hepatitis and B and C virus, and human papillomavirus, and also we have a bacteria associated with Helicobacter pylori. So clearly, what is the epidemiology tells us? This is a courtesy from my colleague Silvia Franceschi at the IARC, and also the colleague of the Cancer Registry Department, Cancer Information Department. Basically, we see that the incidence of this cancer can vary on the different geographical area, and I will come back to this point in the last few slides. Why? Because obviously environmental play also an important role, and also habits of the populations. Clearly, infections also, and cancer is affected by the status of our immune system. So HIV positivity in individuals dramatically increase the risk of virus-associated cancers. And in this slide, just I summarize some of the impact of HIV infections on cancer. So why these viruses, how do they work? How do they induce cancer? So we could subdivide the family of the oncogenic viruses into subgroups. In the one group, the virus, the oncogenic virus, they play a direct role in carcinogenesis. And why they play a direct role? Because they produce proteins that we call oncoproteins, able to facilitate the transformation of normal cells into malignant cells. And here we have a human papillomavirus, human herpes virus 8, also called Kaposi sarcoma herpes virus, Epstein-Barr virus, and human leukemia virus. And then we have the viruses that can create an inflammation. They can, in a chronic infection, they damage the tissue. This is lead to constant regeneration of the lesion, and this is facilitate the transformation. And this is hepatitis B and C, and also the bacterial Helicobacter pylori. I put a question mark there because actually there are emerging indications that also this, for instance, hepatitis B and C could be moved to the group on the direct role. Now, what is really happening when a virus that produces oncoproteins infect the cells? Well, the good news is that these viruses are largely present in the population. So this is an important message for everybody. Getting infections doesn't necessarily mean that we develop cancer. But in the majority of the cases, this infection is cleared by our immune system. So when a virus enters the cells, oncoproteins are produced, and these oncoproteins, the only worry for these oncoproteins is to make more virus, to make the progeny. What do? They deregulate the proliferation of these cells. So the virus is a parasite, keep the cells in a proliferative status. And also, evade the immune system. So it's a battle between the host and the virus. Clearance is occurring in most of the cases. In a minority of cases, there is a persistence of the infections, and this is the event leading to the disease. No persistence, no cancer. And so when you have a persistence of infections, you have a chromosomal DNA damage, chromosomal instabilities, mutations of the DNA. And this is an irreversible process when there is a damage to the DNA, you have cancer development. So I just want to finish with an important message, and I also refer in the beginning of my talk. There are many viruses that are largely distributed in the worldwide population, but the incidence of the associated viruses is strictly dependent on the geographical area. So clearly this is suggesting us that there is a strong cooperation between environmental factors and infections. And I want to mention two classical examples of Epstein-Barr virus associated with the Burkitt lymphoma in the sub-Saharan area in Africa, where, you know, this is a child lymphoma. This is typical of this area in Africa. And nasopharyngeal cancer in Asia, we're getting associated with EBV, but it's strictly associated with this geographical area. So clearly, there are science is focusing also to understand the synergism between infections and environmental factors. So this is very critical for future research. Okay, so I want to finish with the model or hypothesis. So we have the model number one is very well established. The virus infects the cells, persist, induce DNA damage, and lead to cancer. And the virus is important from the beginning to the end, because if we block the viruses in cancer cells, actually we can have a regression of death. We can induce death of the cancer cells. Then we have some examples. The science tells us there are some environmental factors that synergize with the viruses in the model number one, facilitating the life cycle of the virus and lead with more efficiency to establishment of a chronic infection. So it's like oil in the wheel. So these environmental factors facilitate the persistence of infections. And number three is the most difficult model now, is where basically the virus is not the driving force of the carcinogenesis, but is the environmental factor. And I would just like to mention a possible model where a lot of scientists are working on it. It's on non-melanoma skin cancer and UV irradiation, where you have also an important component in this cancer, the immunosuppressed status, strongly suggesting the involvement of infectious agents. And indeed, there are many evidence, there are lines of evidence that papillomavirus cutaneous may facilitate the development of non-melanoma skin cancer. So the science will need to focus on these models, number three, where they are much more difficult, because probably in this case, the virus is not necessarily at the last step of carcinogenesis, so will disappear after. Am I doing okay?
Give you 1 minute more.
No, I think I finished.
Yes?
Okay,
you sure?
So, yeah.
Okay.
So anyway, I'm saying
Conclude.
we are still far from the end, despite we got scientists got the Nobel Prize in 2008 for the Association of Papillomavirus Cervical Cancer. We still need to work a lot to find a new way of association of infections, and this is going to be always a very good news because we know how to fight.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Questions here from our two men? Questions here? No? I have a question. As a journalist now, I'm going to ask you that question. In general, cancers, the major ones, may there be lung, colon, breast, these major cancers are not really associated with viruses. Now, the presentation you have given us are for maybe 3 or 4 marginal cancers, I'd say. If we work on trying to get vaccines, even the HPV vaccine in the United States and Canada, people are not really going for it right now. There seems to be, in general, a problem with vaccines in the population. How can you go about saying that we can personalize and offer vaccines for different types of cancers?
Sorry, I didn't have time to go in details of the epidemiology of this cancer. These are not marginal cancer. In some geographical area, cervical cancer is #1. I mean, it's in Africa.
Emerging countries, in Africa.
Yeah, in Africa, and in the industrialized countries, I think it's 7. I don't recall now the number, but obviously dropped dramatically with the screening of the pap test. So pap test had a fantastic impact, but didn't go to 0. I mean, we have countries where introduced the pap test in 1955 in Finland, but still we have 10 cervical cancer for 100,000 women. So I think it's still a problem, and the vaccine indeed is an extraordinary tools. The important point is that, for instance, in the last 10 years, papillomavirus has been associated with oropharyngeal cancer. 25% of the oropharyngeal cancer are associated. And the bad news is that we see the oropharyngeal cancer negative for papillomavirus decreasing because there is an anti-campaign, anti-tobacco campaign, but oropharyngeal cancer positive for papillomavirus are dramatically increasing. So in Sweden, for instance, we have a triplication of the cancers in 30 years. So I would be very careful as a journalist to use these words, marginal.
Okay.
So it's
maybe Dr. Baudet can give us a perspective. Are we spending enough money generally in order to address this association of viruses and cancer and trying to have tools?
I think there's a lot of funding going to that area. I totally agree with our speaker. It's a phenomenally important area. From a public health perspective, it's the resistance to vaccination that we have, I think, to worry about.
Yeah.
Why isn't the vaccine more rapidly, in use in more countries, and why isn't it mandatory? And why are we seeing in our countries a sudden resistance, even among the educated class, to vaccines, including those vaccines?
That was my question. I'm not again. I'm for vaccines. No, sure. I'm fully vaccinated. Yeah. But the question is, there seems to be in the population a certain resistance. So we're going back to education here, I guess. Yeah.
I just want to point out that I'm a basic researcher, and I have a very naive vision of public health. I work for an institute. It's a research institute, but close to public health, to be part of WHO. And I don't have any conflict of interest because I don't have any relationship with the industry. But I think a vaccine, I strongly believe the vaccine could be really extraordinary tools to fight against this virus-associated cancer. Also, because it's one or two doses in the life, so the cost is almost zero if you compare with therapy. I mean, think about the therapy against hepatitis C costs 80,000 euros. Mm-hmm. And also impacts on the screening program as well. So I think maybe it's not my territory. I don't want to invade public health, but I have this vision.
Well, thank you very much for this nice presentation. Thank you very much.